Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Are we about to start? Yes. Excellent. So, first of all, good morning, everyone, to the EMC 2020 series of webinars. Today's discussion is on the East Mediterranean oil and gas markets. My name is Ashutosh Shastri. I am a director and a founder of a consulting company based out of London, which is a specialized strategy consultancy in the international energy sector called ENERSTRAT Consulting. And I'm going to be your moderator for the day. We have an excellent panel in the form of Dr. Yannis Bassias, who is the former CEO of the Hellenic Hydrocarbon Resources Corporation, a very experienced geologist, and who was also into teaching and writing. So is exceptionally well recognized in this sector. And he is going to be our first speaker following my little introduction. Welcome, Yannis. And then we have from the Tharwa Petroleum Corporation, Mr. Ahmed Sultan, who unfortunately is not able to make it to the event, but he has very kindly sent through his presentation. And this presentation is going to be made by our colleague, Nick Cobb, who's here. Hello, Nick. And
Morning.
good morning. And, when there are any questions related to Mr. Sultan's presentation, we will try as much as possible to take those questions, some of which we may not be able to answer on his behalf. If you could be so kind as to send them to us, then we will have them answered by Mr. Sultan in due course. So he sends his due apologies, but I hope that we will be able to have a cracking discussion on a extremely topical subject of oil and gas in the East Mediterranean basin. My beat and turf is more in the gas and LNG side of things than in upstream oil. And just to give you a flavor of the proceedings for the day, I'm going to make use my moderator's privilege, if you would call it, but make a overview presentation just to set the scene about the East Mediterranean gas issues. And then we will be followed by Dr. Bassias, who will make a presentation, then followed by Mr. Sultan's presentation made by Nick. And we still hope to have plenty of time for questions and answers. And then, we will also have a few announcements and a vote of thanks then by Nick Cobb. So without further ado, what I shall do is start to share my screen with you now and, start my own presentation. So if you allow me, 1 second. So good morning. So, welcome to the East Mediterranean gas within the global LNG landscape. And really, just a few set of slides to kind of set the scene as to provide a perspective on where does the East Mediterranean gas actually fit into the global LNG space. So I will be starting with a few comments about the global gas market. I will kind of provide some ideas about what the future strategy for East Mediterranean gas might look like. There is, of course, no denying it would be churlish not to acknowledge the role of geopolitics that is an important factor that the East Mediterranean gas landscape has to kind of make its way through. And so the real theme of my seminar, of my submission today in this presentation is that, we've all been very familiar with, geopolitics driven by oil. And the first point I'm going to make really is that the future geopolitics, particularly for the East Mediterranean, is driven actually by gas, and gas is the new oil in this landscape. We have an extremely active, vibrant East Mediterranean gas, industry. Right, it is now 20 years since the discovery in Gaza Marine by British Gas in the year 2000. Now, given everything that we are seeing on the ground, we believe there is proven reserves between 52 and 55 TCF already, out of which 42 TCF are around 42 TCF are within Israeli waters. Out of those 42, 30 are actually driven by only two fields, Tamar and Leviathan. And what we've also seen is there's been a big discovery every 10 years in the East Mediterranean. So that's the kind of, some facts around the landscape. So what I'm showing from the slide is a slide taken from the recent IGU World LNG report, where, in 2019, so this is as of 2020. So for the last year, global LNG trade increased to 354 metric tons from about 316 metric tons in 2018. And this is the sixth consecutive growth in global LNG trade. And what is quite interesting is how the shape of this whole LNG business is actually changing, and which is why we feel that gas is actually the new oil. Australia and Qatar are now in a race for global leadership. There is another English-speaking country, the United States, which has now taken up the third position in gas production and exports. Russia is increased to become the fourth player on the export side. So the traditional structure, or the traditional kind of NOC-driven growth that we had seen in the gas business is probably no longer going to be true going forward, as more private companies kind of start to develop gas resources and become international players in the gas business. LNG is one of the dominant drivers for overall global gas trade. And for what we are seeing is a very beginning, is that the leadership of Japan as the topmost importer in the world is now going to be challenged, or is being challenged already by China, which is poised to become the biggest off-taker of international, or the biggest buyer participant in the international gas trade by 2025. All of these things are important to understand. Where does the East Mediterranean gas find a toehold in this international gas market? What is going to be interesting is, again, two other points that I will make on this, in relation to this slide, is that the inter-regional trade for LNG within Asia is 77.3. So it is as big as any producer, or the largest producer in the gas business. And European imports have surged in the last year to almost double, and all of it almost has been LNG. Another interesting statistic from the European perspective is that LNG terminal utilization, which in Europe used to be somewhere between 18 to 22% utilization, has now increased to about 40% utilization. So even a doubling of LNG. So what it indicates is most of the growth that has happened in Europe has happened through LNG. And there is still enough LNG regasification capacity available in Europe to be able to take in greater amounts of gas, presumably some of it from the East Mediterranean. But the question I would like to ask as far as the East Mediterranean is concerned is, we already have 52 to 55 TCF of gas discoveries. What additional TCF of gas discovery is it going to do? And are we actually focusing too much on E&P in the East Mediterranean basin at perhaps the expense of some of the other near-term opportunities to create more vibrancy in the East Mediterranean region? So I'm going to conclude my presentation in a few slides with a few questions, but the next slide will show you another important aspect, which is that The center of gravity of the global gas trade is actually moving east of Europe to Asia. And this is an important consideration for East Mediterranean gas providers and gas discoveries in the East Med region. And the question, first and foremost, that I think needs to be asked is, what are the opportunities or what are the initiatives that can be taken to connect East Med gas to the global gas market, in particular the Asian gas market. This is constrained by geography, so it is probably not going to be easy. But the question is that within the next 5 to 10 years, as the European landscape changes considerably as a result of carbon emission reduction targets, what is the real opportunity, and who is East Med gas competing with to be able to access the stable shrinking European opportunity, and what are the initiatives that might be required to actually capture the opportunities coming up for gas supply in the eastern part of the world. The final question I think that perhaps need to be asked is, what is it that the East Med countries themselves can do to create a vibrant gas market in the region? Because there is a desire for a price marker for a East Med gas to come up. That price marker so far hasn't come up. But, so the question then becomes, what is it that can be done in terms of cooperation agreements? The East Mediterranean region is still a fairly large user of oil and indeed coal. And therefore, what sort of a transition in the East Med region can actually be enabled by the use of natural gas, which is found in its own region? So the other point I will make, and I would like this audience to consider, is particularly for the East Mediterranean region, what is going to be interesting in my mind is the role of small-scale LNG. And the 316 million tons, which is the end of 2018, early 2019 figures, indicate that the non-long-term market, which is the short-term LNG contracting market, is probably 1/3 the size of the global market. That non-long-term market or short-term traded market is probably today around going to be around 200 to 250 million tons by 2030. Small-scale LNG is currently between around 50 million tons, and that market is going to double in the next 10 years. And given the local discoveries within the region, a question perhaps needs to be asked. How is the East Mediterranean region performing in small-scale LNG compared to its counterparts just next door in the Western Mediterranean? The Gas Infrastructure Europe, which is the asset infrastructure monitoring body in Europe, has usually comes out with some very good maps and reports. And it might be worthwhile to have a look at that. Of course, I'm not going to show you all the slides because I can refer them to you so that you can have a look at the documents themselves. My job really is to just highlight the key issues and then hand over to our next speaker. And so I want to kind of conclude in this slide by saying that particularly in the East Mediterranean region, exploration and production is increasingly, becoming a drill boat diplomacy exercise. Turkey, Lebanon, Greece, they're all, they're all prospecting in the waters because there is gas, more resources to be found. But it has already been 20 years since the Gaza Marine discovery. There is not even a reference price yet. The Tamar and Leviathan make up more than 50% of the current explored proven resources. And how they are going to be utilized in the global gas market remains an open question. Egypt, and we will see from the presentation that Nick is going to make on behalf of Mr. Sultan, is a big player in the region. So apart from Turkey, there are other big players in the region who can actually create an anchor market for based on small-scale LNG in the East Mediterranean. So the connecting this resource base to the global gas market is going to be important. And I will conclude by saying that although the East Med gas pipeline got its PCI status in January 2020, a final investment decision is expected by 2022, and perhaps the first gas flow to Europe will happen by 2025. The question needs to be asked, what is the European gas market going to look in 2025? And whether East Med gas will find the toehold that it actually seeks in Europe. And so I will conclude by asking a question whether it makes pragmatic sense for the East Mediterranean gas region to explore opportunities beyond Europe into the growth markets of Asia to kind of find for itself a secure, attractive future. Thank you very much. I have a Twitter handle where I do kind of post comments regarding these and other energy-related topics. I would be happy if you would be interested in following me. I will follow you back. And I think, with that, I have come to the close of my overview presentation. And I invite Dr. Bassias to make his presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and come back on the video in a minute. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Dr. Bassias, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation, possibility to give a presentation that in fact, I gave several times, and it has to do with what is happening in the Southeast Mediterranean from the point of view of the geology, geophysics, and a little bit of economics, not a lot. So yeah, and I will focus on the reasons why we have several tiles that when you connect, you have a better view of what is happening in the area in the last 10, 15 years. So it is a story of tiles. This is true. And okay, let's go to the first slide. Thank you. So the point is, what is happening is that there is a chase for the gas reserves in the Mediterranean the last 2 decades, and then more recently, because a lot of new ideas came in terms of the geological models, etc., etc. But the three main reasons they drive this evolution now. First of all, and Mr. Shastri, Dr. Shastri said that before, the diversification of gas supply in the Mediterranean and Europe is very, very important, and it is one of the reasons why the industry was interested, is interested, and will be more interested in the area. The second of the reasons is that the technology today allows to go and drill to deep waters, ultra deep waters, 3,000 meters, more than 3,000 meters. At this time, we may have in the Gulf of Mexico, for instance, we may have entire factories on the sea bottom. They do all the job, and you just have one platform on the top of the sea, and nothing more. So all the work is done below water on the sea bottom. And so technology is not only for drilling, it is not only for the climate prediction, but it is all of this production process that is done below water today, and it will be more and more frequent in the next 10 years, I think. The third reason that allowed to have so much interest in the area, it is that the geological model changed in the last 10 years, I would say, with the discovery of the reefs. So it was not only the deltaic, it was not only the clastic, what was coming from the Nile Delta, but you had reefs, you had lagoons, and those were buried below sediments, and became a second geological model that today is, I would say, the responsible, if you want, of more than 50 TCF proven in the Southeast Mediterranean. Let's go to the next slide. So we will start looking at the diversification of the gas supply. But immediately, I mean, from this image, you realize what? You realize that there is a concentration of gas infrastructures, not a lot, but maybe a lot, in the eastern and mostly southeastern part of the East Mediterranean. And then all of this half Mediterranean, which is the Eastern Mediterranean, you have nothing. You have only pipes. They feed the economies of each country. And I put here only the most important pipes for this eastern part, because we will reflect a little bit on that later on. So you have the blue stream that you have in blue crossing crossing Black Sea. It is a big pipe, 15 BCM. It is, and it was built in 2001, and it lays on 2,000 meters of water. So technology was there a long, long time ago. And then you have you can realize that TAP and Blue Stream, they come from east, west, and also the big plan of the East Med is from east to west. So what does it mean that? It means that the main idea is to feed Europe today. Yes, I agree with Dr. Shastri that it is so small and there is so much need if you go east, China, etc. But this direction from east to west shows where is the need today. The point is this need will maintain after 10 years, yes or no? Those are the big questions that the investors, they think about, and this is why we don't have very drastic decisions at this time, not for the exploration, but for the transportation. And we will see later on that there is a big dilemma. Is it pipeline? Is it LNG? What shall we do? And here you realize that Greece is somewhere in the center of this part of the Mediterranean. In fact, it is the westernmost part of Eastern Mediterranean and the easternmost part of Western Mediterranean. And then this is why Greece would like and is trying to become a hub. But there is a big competition. Who will be the hub? Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, Greece? We don't know yet. And in fact, the market will decide. It is not the political vision that will decide. It is not the technical technology that will decide. It is the market. And the market means who needs more gas, to the west or to the east. These are questions that we probably develop and answer maybe in the next meeting, conference that we have after 5 years. But today it is not very easy to say where are we going. So let's go to the next slide. Talking about technology, as I said before, the second of the three reasons. Look what is going on. What you have on the right side of this image, this dark blue, it is very, very recent exploratory wells. Were in India, Uruguay, Angola. The big boys, they did that, not small companies, not intermediate companies, the big boys, because it costs a hell of money. You need to have a good technology. You need to be able to predict even the weather conditions going back to 2 years track and in history. It is a big experiment, but the only one, the deepest that is producing today in terms of water, it is Stone, which is in the Gulf of Mexico. And as you can see, they started produce really in 2016, although it was an area in the field that was known since maybe 15 years, I think. So this is the tendency. This is where we go, below the 3,000 meters. And this is what we have south of Crete. This is what we have in Western Greece in a lot of parts. So it means that nobody could do that before. Now, technically, we can go and drill in these areas. And it is not because it was a secret. Nobody wanted to talk about that. There is no conspiracy. There is nothing like that. It is technology. Now we can do that. Let's go to the next slide. So geology, as I said, the third reason. The third reason is, well, you see, we have the lagoons, we have the atolls, reefs in the Atlantic, the Pacific Ocean, and those are the present, recent, today. And this is where the tourists like to go. But we had reefs 50 million years ago, 35 million years ago, 28 million years ago. And this is, I'm talking about the Eastern Mediterranean. And you have some examples here, north of Egypt, the famous Zohr, southwest of Crete, with the new seismic that we have in Greece, south of Crete, south of Cyprus. Can you see? I mean, it is obvious that you realize that it is same structures. And we have plenty of structures of those. This is what you can see on the left corner, down. All of these red dots are geometries. They resemble, they look like those of the Israeli part, Egyptian part, Cypriot part. But we don't have wells. Nothing is drilled yet. This is why these red spots in Greece are larger. If there is a discovery, the red spot will become smaller, evidently. But we have a lot. And this is why it is important to have finally complete exploration in the area with drilling, and we will have some discoveries. All of these red spots that you have starting from the Ionian Sea and going down south of Crete, according to the work, the estimations done by HHRM, the state company in Greece, they are about 70 TCF. And if only you have a success of 20%, 20% or 25% of 70, it is sufficient not only to resolve economical problems, issues of Greece, but also to become what? To become the part that doubles what we have proven in the southeastern Mediterranean. So from 70, 80, you go to 170, 150. And then it becomes much more interesting for the industry. And this is a conclusion that we have to bring in our discussion later on about the big dilemma. Is it good to have LNG? Is it good to have a pipeline? Can we mix both of those? When can we do that? When you will put 100 to make 120, because nobody will put 100, invest 100 to make 50. So this is why, until now, it is only feasibility and pre-feasibility studies. Next slide, please. So why all of this? It is just to show you that the ultra-deep and very ultra-deep water now, we approach not 5,000 feet, but 16,000 feet. It becomes very important. And in the next years, this is what we will have. So probably the world will need something, I mean, the ultra deep will provide something like 20 million barrels equivalent a day. And that is again one of the reasons that drives the investor. And this is why it drives the technician also. And this is why then drives the political people. They want to make profit for their country of this situation. Next slide, please. Now, it is very, very basic economics, very brief. There is nothing to take it as granted, but it is more or less like that. So here it is the experience we have on the last years of the cost of transportation, LNG, pipeline onshore, gas pipeline, and pipeline offshore. And when you bring the TAP experience and you compare with East Med experience by dividing what you have in offshore part of the total length. And what you have offshore, it looks that maybe we could be on something like $3 to transport, which is maybe quite expensive if you compare with the LNG cost. But you have a lot of factors of risk that if you bring there inside, either you will raise the cost of the LNG, or you will lower the cost of the pipeline. So these are the issues that today everybody's studying. And I want to come back again on the point that if we have the sufficient volumes of reserves, decisions will be made easier. For now, it is still discussions and visions because we need to double the reserves in the Eastern Mediterranean. Can we go to the next slide, please? Again, something that the United Nations produced the statistics and predictions, and it is very informative. If you look at the top box, so it says what? It says that per capita energy consumption today is what we have, okay? But according to the increase of the population, we will need in 2050 70 times more energy altogether. I'm not talking about oil, gas. I'm talking about nuclear, water, etc., solar, wind, etc., etc. And if you reverse now the analysis and you say not the per capita energy, but if we want to keep the present total world energy at this level, we will have to reduce our consumption, each one personally, by 22% in 2050, or 32 in 2100. Yeah. Well, evidently, and there's some truth to say, someone who lives in Europe, US, or other developed or very developed countries consumes more energy than someone who lives in a developing country or area. So who will have to reduce more his needs? Those who live in the developed countries. So maybe we will have to reduce, if this is the case, and we don't have more discoveries, and we don't have more reserves, we will have to reduce maybe by 50%. So these are issues that have to do with demographics also, and so the need for energy, it is not something very, very simple. Let's go to the next slide, please. So those are the three tiles, and if you start from right and you go left, you have recent gas discoveries and gas production in this area, the third tile. There is something else that we have to consider, which is very important. Black Sea. Black Sea, it is part of the game. It is not independent. And it is part of the game, not only because the water depths there were between 1,500 and 2,000 meters, while in the Egyptian, Israeli, and Cypriot area, the average was 1,200 meters. In the Black Sea, we have 2,000 meters water depth for the big discoveries. And in Greece, expected, the average is 2,900 meters of water depth, and a lot of prospects, leads, ideas, regions of interest. A lot of those are at 3,500 meters water depth. So technology, as I said at the beginning, obviously moves from shallower depths to deeper parts, like those we have south of Crete, and in some parts of the Ionian as you go south. Next slide, please. Next slide. So here we are. And I come back again on what I said before. We need these volumes to satisfy the needs for Europe, but also to satisfy the needs for the countries around the Mediterranean Sea. It is not only North Europe that needs gas. There is a lot of development in the entire area, North Africa, Middle East, Turkey, Greece, Italy. So discoveries in this area, you understand that will fill an empty place. Let's go to the next slide. And I come back again on what I gave you before as information conclusion is that we have a general trend. We have three trends from east to west. And you see how central is the position offshore of Greece for exploration. Next slide, please. Again, imagine that you're a magician and you take out, just like that, 3,000 meters of water. This is what you have. What is in yellow, all the shades of yellow or brown, it is now continental. And the two big blocks that are still water with the blocks with the white perimeter are the blocks where Total with Exxon and Hellenic Petroleum are together. And you can imagine that these guys, they will not go to drill 3,000 meters of water just to drill 3,000 meters of water. It means that sea bottom, it is below 3,000 meters here. And if you look at the other two in the center, south of Crete, with the red perimeter lines, those are the areas we studied recently, and they have a lot of interest, and they have also parts that are below 3,000 meters of water. So this is what is going to happen in this area. And this is why it happens now, because now technology allows to do that. It is very simple. Let's go to the next slide, and I think it is the last one. Oh, it is I want to point out something that is very important. As I said before, we're talking about 70 TCF or 12 billion barrels oil equivalent. And it is important for Greece that there are no delays, because look at the right part of the presentation. When you have delays, what does it mean? It means that the household will pay gas more than before. It means that the country will not collect taxes. And it means that all the big projects for infrastructures are postponed. And this is why it is very important to go fast, but it shows also how the discovery and production will make better the economy of the country. Next slide. And it is just to show you what we learned in Greece in the last three years, since the time that HHRM, the state company, started working technically, is that we are just at the beginning. It is a frontier area, but the combination between the exploration, possibly production, and what we have in the midstream, like storage facilities, it is a quite good combination that could help the development of the country more than that, and probably because of its central position in this part of the Mediterranean to become a hub. Next slide. And in the next 3-4 years, this is what will happen. We will have bigger companies. They will enter the game because of the foreign investment will be necessary, because the money that will be required for the transportation and also for production and transportation will be big money. And for that, we will have a change in the I would say, panorama of the investors who are working and are present today in Greece. Next slide. Thank you, Efkaristo, and available for questions anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bassias. Excellent presentation. I made a few notes about a few questions about hubs, but I guess what we will do in terms of our rolling order is we will now have the presentation from Mr. Ahmed Sultan given by Nick Cobb, and then we will take up some questions. There already, I have to say at this point, there already are some questions that are coming up. We are monitoring those, and we will take them up in the Q&A session. So I just want participants to know that your questions are noted.
I cannot hear you.
Am I being heard? Okay.
No.
Oh, I see. Nick, you can hear me,
Yep.
right? Can the participants hear me? Okay, excellent. So I think the participants can hear me. All right, so over to Nick, who is going to make a presentation. Thank you, Dr. Bassias, and over to Nick now for the presentation regarding the Tharwa Petroleum Company from Egypt. Floor is yours, Nick.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh. It's been a great presentation, set of presentations so far, and I'd like to thank both Ashutosh and Yannis. There'll be hard acts to follow, and I would also like to send, on behalf of Dr. Sultan, his apologies. Sadly, he was taken into a management meeting, which he just could not get out of, and obviously you don't want to miss those. So he asked if I could kindly present his paper today, which was a great honor to do. Now, Dr. Sultan is a very nice chap. He's also very happy to answer any questions that you may have. And at the end, we'll be sharing his email address. So either you can pop your questions into the chat box and the Q&A below, or you can simply send in an email and we'll forward that on. So I hope I do Dr. Sultan's excellent presentation proud, but let's start. So Dr. Sultan's presentation on behalf of Tharwa Petroleum will really assess not only sort of the key projects and developments, but also look at some of the other underlying themes that we've seen develop so far, namely that of the geopolitics, rising supply and demand, and how some of these new frontier developments can adapt. And it's worth noting that clearly the COVID-19 pandemic has absolutely thrown a spanner in the works, as it were, in terms of project development. But new discoveries are being made, as we'll see. But, next slide, please. So just a little about Dr. Sultan. Here he is over on the left-hand side. He graduated from the Faculty of Petroleum in 2005, finished his PhD in petrophysics in 2017, and now heads the petrophysics department for Tharwa Petroleum. He is the author of 25 papers and presentations, and in 2018 was awarded, which is a great accolade, an excellence award from the Minister of Petroleum of Egypt. And again, on the left-hand side, you can see him receiving his award. And congratulations to him for that. So next slide, please. So in short, it's fairly safe to say that the Eastern Mediterranean offers some amazing frontier opportunities, projects and transactions in the medium to long term. In fact, only really this month it was announced that, or actually this Monday, in fact, it was announced that both BP and Total have discovered a major new offshore gas find in the Noah El Hamad concession, offshore Egypt. So even with the current crisis, health crisis, we are seeing a continued activity in the region. And the geopolitical location of the Eastern Mediterranean means that it can not only access and help supply the growing or potentially growing demand in the EMEA region, but also the national economies. Next slide, please. So it is absolutely true that sizable gas reserves could be a game changer in the East Med. And we have seen this. Governments traditionally respond to such reserves and put resources and time and diplomatic energies into such reserves. But from a purely commercial and oil and gas perspective, we have seen three very sizable gas reserves discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean, which we'll go through in a little more detail. What Yannis mentioned and referred to earlier was a concentration, but a lack of infrastructure that can help truly exploit those resources, which we'll see as we go through the slides. Next slide, please. So why is the offshore gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, why does it have a complicated road? I mean, what are the headlines about? Ultimately, it comes down to the politics and the market dynamics. From the market dynamic perspective, we know, of course, that European demand for natural gas is increasing. Oil is remaining stable globally, but it really comes down to the politics, and particularly in a frontier region, we have to look specifically at exclusion zones and maritime zones. These are all areas that are currently being played out in the international arena. And as we can see from this picture here, it's a wonderful example of that, and it's a Turkish drilling FPSO. Next slide, please. So, Eastern Mediterranean energy, the new world oil and gas order. So natural gas findings in the Eastern Mediterranean are changing the energy landscape of the region. On the one hand, countries who used to import natural gas, such as Cyprus and Israel, we're now seeing becoming almost, developing the infrastructure for gas exports, and particularly fed by the Aphrodite fields and Leviathan fields. On the other hand, we're also seeing that the Arab Spring uprisings over the past 10 years and 15 years, these have also given rise to a new economic impetus within these countries, across the region. So domestic demand is also growing, but that coupled with a growth in, the discovery of these new frontier fields, there is actually a surplus of gas for export, which we can go through and unpack in the next couple of slides. So we see that the Egypt gas, can we go back to the previous slide? Sorry. So just a couple of points here. So tying directly in with the surplus for gas for export is the reversing the flow. And we're seeing specifically that Egypt's idle gas export infrastructure serves as the new energy security needs for both Egypt and the region. And the GulfOilAndGas.com, a very good site for those that are yet to discover it. Their analysts study multiple routes to suggest that the construction of a new pipeline for monetizing gas discoveries for offshore Cyprus was indeed possible. We're also seeing here a direct demand for LNG infrastructure in the region. Okay, next slide, please. So, what are the prospects for the new decade? So, as we move into from 2020, the last decade has seen the Eastern Mediterranean region becoming truly a hotspot for the global natural gas industry. It's attracted both increased attention and investment from a number of leading major oil and gas national oil companies and IOCs, including Exxon, Total, BP, and it's we're not really seeing that momentum stopping, even despite COVID. Projects have slowed, obviously, given the current health crisis. But as we see, even this week alone, activity is still expanding. So, as new discoveries come on stream, that will also give rise to new infrastructure. Next slide, please. So we mentioned earlier on, for example, there were 3 large finds in the region. We've seen Egypt's offshore Zohr field with reserves of 21.5 trillion cubic feet of gas, a very sizable discovery, and more being added to that number. We've also seen the Israeli offshore Tamar and Leviathan fields with 11 trillion cubic feet and 22 trillion cubic feet of reserves. This obviously means that Israel is becoming has a potential, both Egypt and Israel and Cyprus have the potential to become major exporters in the region. And respectively also the 8 trillion cubic feet Aphrodite find off of the coast of Cyprus. So these all have the potential to transform the region's energy landscape. In Egypt, for example, the Zohr development with ENI, amongst others, has led to a renaissance in gas production. Output grew from a low of 3.9 cubic feet per day in 2016 to 6.65 billion cubic feet in February 2019, a pretty sizable increase there of 1/3. And for both Israel and Cyprus, the respective gas discoveries have promised even greater energy security and new export revenues. And this really is one of the crux of the issues in the region. Geopolitics is a thread that has been mentioned throughout the presentations this morning. And of course, one way to overcome, the geopolitical competition is to become an exporter and develop your own and secure your own energy supplies. So these 3 fields have the potential to do that, subject to expanded infrastructure moving ahead, and of course, a growth in European markets. Next slide, please. So here we have a slide, and I'll allow you all to read through this. As I mentioned earlier, the slides will be sent out in due course. But a little about the history. So the Eastern Mediterranean gas saga, as it's been stated, was started in 2009 and ran through to 2011 with the discovery of the Tamar and Leviathan fields offshore Israel and the Aphrodite field offshore to Cyprus. To exploit this potential, an increasing number of export options were progressively placed, ranging from pipelines, with one from Greece, another to Turkey, to the growth of LNG plants, respectively in Cyprus, Israel, and Egypt. And there are great expectations characterized in those years. There were great expectations characterized in those years, I should say, as to the new gas discoveries and the new economic and political stability in the region, and how those gas discoveries could support that. Since then, we've seen these expectations reduced. In Israel, a long-lasting internal political debate on the management of gas resources has created a climate of uncertainty that's contributed to the delay of key investment decisions, which has slowed practical development. In Cyprus, where the gas was discovered, in the Aphrodite field, this was welcomed as a godsend to relieve the country of its financial troubles and have the potential to turn the country itself into a gas power in its own right. This initial enthusiasm has been cooled by successive downward revisions of the expected resources, and these developments have raised skepticism of the general idea the Eastern Mediterranean might become a gas exporting region. That said, activity is still taking place. Next slide, please. So in 2015, we saw a turning point as initial high hopes bounced back when Eni discovered the Zohr gas field offshore Egypt, the largest gas discovery ever made in the Mediterranean. And due to an unprecedented fast-track development of production at the Zohr field in 2017, this allowed Egypt to recover both self-sufficiency in natural gas production after a number of turbulent years. We've also seen the significance of Zohr and other offshore fields, which goes beyond Egypt's national boundaries, as geographical proximity with other fields close to Israel and Cyprus place a sense of competitive regional gas exporting infrastructure. What we're seeing here is not only cooperation, and international cooperation amongst the IOCs, but also in many ways amongst the region's nations themselves. These are pooled resources in many ways which need to be coordinated. Next slide, please. So this presents a number of options, which prompted the exploration of substantial volumes of gas from Egyptian, Israeli, and Cypriot fields. And once these domestic needs are covered, obviously these nations can then start to look at exporting. In January 2019, the energy ministers of Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, and Jordan, along with representatives of Italy, as well as the Palestinian authorities, met in Cairo to discuss how to foster regional cooperation in the combined development of offshore gas discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean. The result of this discussion, this high-level strategic meeting, was the establishment of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, EMGF. And this is a platform aimed at developing a regional gas market, which starts by taking advantage of the existing LNG infrastructure in Egypt, and throughout the year holds subsidiary meetings with ministers and their aides to contribute to the more technocratic development of this project. So all in all, it's great to see not only the fields being developed, but also a combined approach to their further development. Next slide, please. So to conclude, we've seen a string of recent hydrocarbon discoveries in the Eastern Mediterranean. And once again, we see that world energy production could increasingly be shaped not only by democratic states that are favorable and friendly to the established international order, as well as to liberal democracies in particular. In the future, development of the strategic resources of the Eastern Mediterranean will bring both self-sufficiency in energy to Israel, as well as a relief from painful economic constraints in EU member Cyprus. It could also enhance current diplomatic efforts to improve regional stability and security, as well as including the security of an increasingly vulnerable Turkey, whose political and strategic future as a member of the Atlantic Alliance is increasingly in doubt. And there are a number of examples here. Moreover, through the creation and expansion of a secure energy production sector that includes Greece, East Mediterranean energy could come to directly supply Europe and therefore help to reduce the European Union's vulnerabilities to perceived Russian coercion. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've already covered this point, but this will be in your slide packs. Next slide, please. So Dr. Sultan has also included some useful recommendations. So not only assessing the history and the projects and the infrastructure, but also some practical considerations. So the first step in unlocking the East Med's full potential is to change the geopolitical game for the better, is to construct a secure regional market with the democratic producers of the Levant Basin as its foundation, and with the immediate neighborhood as its ultimate destination. So really creating a regional gas market there. Next slide, please. However, to unlock the full game-changing potential of the East Med's natural gas and energy sector, it requires a large-scale involvement in the international private sector. The liberal democracies must succeed in making the East Mediterranean more secure. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So on behalf of Dr. Sultan and Tharwa Petroleum, I would like to thank you all for listening. I hope I've done his highly interesting presentation some justice, and you'll see here his email address. This presentation will be sent out to you. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nick. I think you definitely did great justice to his presentation.
Thank you.
We have about at least half an hour for discussion, so plenty of time. There are a few questions that have come in. Using the moderator's privilege, may I actually ask the first question to Dr. Bassias? Dr. Bassias, thank you very much for, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So I found your presentation extremely fascinating for the parallels that you gave with the deep water experience in the Gulf of Mexico. And the very clear way in which you showed how Greece is positioned at the center. It's western part of the East Mediterranean, eastern part of the West Mediterranean. And there has also been a similar question that has come up in the question and answer session. So first of all, and it's a speculative question, we are talking about geopolitics. There is a lot of cooperation going on between the American oil and gas upstream industry and European gas industry. And given the experience of the Gulf of Mexico, first of all, from a technology standpoint, do you see the players in the Gulf of Mexico showing an interest in developing similar deep waters in Greece or in the region that you've indicated? What sort of a, how would you respond to, if that would happen, what is the likely impact on the region? The question then becomes, and which is really my question, how does one price that gas? And you spoke about the hubs in the East Mediterranean. There is always a race for hubs. I think the race for hubs in East Mediterranean is not unusual. There is a race for hubs in Asia Pacific. There is a race for hub in Central Europe. There is a race for hubs in many other parts. So, and I agree with you that it is entirely always market-driven, market-led. But in the context of this situation, how do you see the scenario emerging if there emerges a US-Greece collaboration for developing the region similar to are we seeing a new Gulf of Mexico come up in the East Mediterranean? Is my short question.
Well, it is even the southeast. It is a frontier area.
Right.
So imagine when you go further west. Greece, south of Crete, Libya, offshore. Everything is frontier there. Yeah. So it is very difficult to predict or say that we may become a new Gulf of Mexico. This is I don't think that this may happen for several reasons. Because in order to arrive at this stage, it will take maybe 15, 20 years. And in 15, 20 years, a lot of changes will come. I'm not talking about the solar panels. I'm talking about big changes in terms of hydrogen, in terms of other technologies that will appear. So no, I don't think. Simply, we have to consider that the big companies, they are working around the world, and they don't have only one project. They have 10 or 20 projects a year running, because according to the Pareto law, it is 20% of that will work. So if it is 10, you will have 2 that will pay for the other 8 and make some profit. And we are talking about projects, they will last 5, 10, or 15, or 20 years. So we are not the center of the world, the Mediterranean. And your second slide, that was, I think it was from the BP yes. Outlook. It is very informative what is going on and where all of this gas around the world is going. I mean, China is the place with important needs for energy, and yeah. No, I think that it is until now it is small. We are not even 100 TCF. And can you imagine? We talked about Russia and the way that Russia is providing, and how much is providing to Europe on gas. I think that the proven reserves of Russia in gas, it is maybe 10 times more. It is 1,000 TCF. It is not 100 TCF. So. No, there is a geopolitical environment in this area. I mean, Southeast Mediterranean. There is some gas. There will be more, but not Gulf of Mexico. I don't think that.
Okay. All right. There are 3 questions from Fivos. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Fivos Andritisos. And the first question that he had asked was, the Mediterranean is a vital maritime supply route. When this COVID-19 crisis is going to be over, a wider oil and gas exploration of the subsalt deposit is perhaps inevitable. But given the environmental pressures and everything that will come up, how would you respond to an idea of and I have to get this right, an operational center of support in the East Mediterranean? Presumably he's talking about some sort of an international cooperation being established in the East Mediterranean. The second question that he has is relating to the safety of the pre-salt and health and safety around pre-salt. And the third question that he has asked is, why not CNG and LNG? Probably the last question I can take, but Dr. Bassias, if you could kind of respond to the first two questions that he's asked, that would be great.
Excuse me, the first question was what?
The first question was, is there an opportunity for a joint research, for a joint operational center, or some sort of a asset-based collaboration in the region, and what sort of that collaboration might look like?
The collaboration started already, and this is why the gas forum was built, and it is the contribution of several countries, and I think that this forum will drive a big part of the evolution of the area. So yes, there is cooperation. It is political, it is technical, it is legal. Don't forget that this gas forum is divided in subcommittees, and we have three important subcommittees. One that is the technical, the second the legal, and the third I would say related to economics. And well, it really started in some months ago, but it will continue and develop more and more. Now for the emergency response, the risk that we may have at this depth when you explore, when you drill, when you produce. As far as it concerns Greece, I know very well because we implemented the European directive 3 years ago. And this European directive on the security, safety of the offshore installations, it is something that continues to improve. It is very strong. It obliges the companies to take care and have bank guarantees that become more and more important. So from that point of view, I don't think that there is a problem. We do our best. Now the technology risk, an accident, yes, it can happen, but Macondo, it doesn't happen every 10 or 20 years. So the reaction, I mean, you may have an accident all the time, but this is not the case. I mean, for you, for me, for everybody. And you remember what we say, that you have more chances to have an accident when you take your car and you go to the airport rather than when you fly with the airplane. So yeah, I don't think that there is need for exaggeration about that. It is, but we have to consider that it is only in the last 3 years that there is a drilling on these ultra deep waters, and it is something that improves. Don't forget that I think it was the 50s, 60s when it was in US. They drilled 50 meters of water, and it was everybody was saying the same, that it is dangerous. And now it is not 50 meters, it is not 500 meters.
3,000.
3,000.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. So the final question that Fivos asked was about CNG technology, and isn't CNG more efficient than LNG? Well, yes and no. I think what I would say is that we do not have an example or a reference case where the from the ENP straight to a CNG technology has been taken. ENP involves bringing the gas onshore. And once the gas is onshore, depending upon the distance to travel, you can have a difference between the LNG and the CNG economics. I think the more interesting part of FIVOS really is that, and this was the point made by Dr. Bassias and also that came out in Dr. Sultan's presentation, which is that the region must develop its own internal gas market to be able to become a reference first. And in order to do that, I made a point about small scale LNG, but the whole European experiment at the moment, with the 10E regulation in Europe, the developments in the Western Mediterranean in Spain and Italy with small scale LNG seem to indicate that it probably is not sufficient to have power sector as the major off-taker for LNG. And therefore, as transportation becomes more and more of a bigger off-taker, the demand for CNG will probably be greater. And that will probably drive the economics more in CNG's favor than less. Again, speculative answer, but that's my perspective on these things.
Sorry, Ashutosh, if I may just quickly jump in there.
Yeah.
When it comes to developing regional markets and regional price benchmarking, it's also worth mentioning the role here of the pricing agencies, Platts and Argus as well, and how much time they will take to make their own case to develop that. I mean, I remember many years ago when I worked for Argus Media, it took them 3 to 4 years to even benchmark Iraqi crude. So there are additional players here aside the major oil companies and NOCs and governments. It's also the actual price benchmarking that also the contracts will be settled on. So that's another consideration. Thank
you, Nick. There are 2 questions relating to mid to east Mediterranean, west of Crete. One is from Nicodemu, who says, a quick question to the panelists. Do you think there is a possibility that a second separate hydrocarbons frontier emerges in the mid to east Mediterranean, into bracket, west of Crete, offshore Libya, western extremity of the Egyptian EEZ? And there's a second question in the similar vein, which has been asked by Kevin Filler, who says the area mentioned south of Crete is currently unlicensed, into bracket open. Is future offshore licensing round likely soon? So I guess a natural owner of those questions is probably you, Dr. Bassias, if you could, please. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. The first question, at this time, there is a lot of excitement by each of the North Africa countries about deep offshore exploration. There is some new seismic in Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, no doubt. I would say that even Morocco is interested, because there is a small part that can be interesting, although there is no exploration done for these purposes in all of these North African territory, I would say. But it is true that every country is interested to see if they can enter in this game. Undoubtedly, Greece and Libya are more Western with a lot of interest. But each country wants to enter on this game. Why? Because if they find they can provide to Europe, and then you have another trend, aches of supply that comes from south to north. So yes, it is. All the countries are interested, and we have new geophysical campaigns at this time. Now, for the second question, the reason that we did not go until now to an international tender was because of the European legislation has 3 options, allows either to go to a round, either to have something open, or receive the expression of interest by a company or a consortium, that automatically will open the tender. And what we wanted to avoid all of this time was that we have a tender for areas while the neighboring areas west and southwest of Crete did not start yet the geophysics. We did not want to try to do something that probably will end up with no interest, and this is very bad. The second reason is that, you know, when in a European country you initiate a tender, you have 6 to 9 months because of the bureaucratic procedures that are not only in the country, but also in Brussels. I mean, the European Union. There is a translation in 24 languages. This is not done in 1 month. There is then the publication with a certain order, time order, the publication in the European Gazette. Then you have to do your trade show in every, I would say, important capital where there are meetings, etc. The approach was much more simple for us. We jumped in the plane and we went to talk to the companies and explain and exchange. And that was the way it was produced, also the result for what we have west and southwest of Crete with Total and Exxon.
Okay, thank you very much. There is a more pertinent recent development related question by Professor Hakan Berment, who asks, how do you see the purchase of Nobel by Chevron? What will be the change in the region?
The question is addressed to me?
Well, the question is addressed to a panel. Yes, to everyone. But you know, I'm you know, if you could start, then I could then come back to responding to.
Well, it is very interesting. I would say besides the need of a solution for Aphrodite, because Aphrodite was discovered long time ago.
Yes.
And 6 months ago, we were saying that in 2025 it will start producing because it will be connected with Zohr. But nothing is done yet. And then you have the coronavirus, and then you have all of these problems in the economy and the price of the barrel that dropped down. So it is important to have a second company with so much experience. And for me, but this is a personal thought, Chevron is important because it is the first company, I think, that developed large submarine factories, I would say.
Yeah.
Not with simple robotics, but real factories on the sea bottom. And this is something that we will need. And don't forget that even in Cyprus now, we have areas where they drill, like Locos from Exxon. It is 2,000 meters water depth. So everybody's moving to this kind of water depths, and we may have with this kind of companies and technology, maybe in 10 years we will have some small factories with all the security procedures at 2,500 meters water depth.
Correct. Well, my perspective, for whatever it's worth, Dr. Beriment, is that it will create the frontier. I mean, there is a lot of gas that is to be explored, and clearly, if the East Med gas pipeline has now got the project of community interest status, then it increases the likelihood that it will, despite the current discussion in the European Union on the taxonomy, it just creates a greater opportunity for furthermore E&P activity in the region. And that requires a certain type of a player, certain kind of experience already. And it is in a way also, I think, relating to my initial question, that one does see a little bit of, evolution of an American export platform in Europe. They are interested in not only supplying their LNG from the US, but also participating in the region in a little bit more active manner. So I guess, corporations make their decisions based on a number of issues, number of factors. But I really appreciate the point you made about an important fact that you brought to light, that Chevron was one of the earliest, players to have developed the subsurface infrastructure system. And that is something they can bring to the table in this part of the world. There is a couple of more questions. One is about from Ettore Carcione. The euphoria of the Green Deal is pushing public opinion to think that we shall get rid of fossil energy, and some countries already. Do you think there is still hope that communities realize that a transition could not be sustainable without the production of oil and gas? So essentially, what are the implications for East Mediterranean gas in a post-2025 environment where, and I made the point in my own presentation also, that the circumstances within which the EU will be importing future natural gas will be in a different market circumstances. My own perspective, for whatever it is worth, on this question is that it all depends on which countries and how quickly the decarbonization actually accelerates on the ground. So if you have more and more coal-fired plants actually shutting down, particularly in Southern Europe. So far, we have not, the only activity we have seen in Southern Europe is in Portugal, which has started to kind of, reduce its coal-fired power production. But otherwise, most of the coal shutdowns are in Northern Europe or Scandinavia. We haven't seen that in southern parts of Europe. The easier we get to see that trend in the southern part of Europe, that creates a wider opening or a wider foothold or a toehold for East Med gas to continue to find its footprint in the region. Any thoughts, Dr. Bassias, Nick, in terms of, how do you see EU regulation and, this is about renewables versus gas in a sense.
Yeah, so I'll give just slightly Northern European view. I mean, I think this year, for the first time, we saw in the UK, power generation without coal, for the first time, for I think it was a 6-week period, where no production at all. The UK power grid was made by coal-fired power stations. We've also seen the same in Germany as well. So look, I mean, wherever the demand is, I mean, I think there is a social demand now. It's less about the business. It's actually more about people, I think, wanting to feel that they're doing their bit, and the power that they're using is coming from a sustainable source. I think the problem that we have is actually the messaging and the communications and the PR point about how do we position natural gas as a clean alternative to say to winter, to some of the more traditional power generation. So I think it's going to be slowly changing people's, or trying to sort of influence and put from the PR point, and then trying to sell that idea that the natural gas is actually the best alternative. It's a more cost-effective alternative.
Okay. And then I think we have answered most of the questions. There's one question from Michelle Capobianco. What kind of local and regional infrastructures do you think are needed to help serving the potential local and regional market users, and when? What do you think could help creating such infrastructure? This is really a question about, the midstream infrastructure or the inter-regional connectivity to actually create a local market within the region. Thoughts, Dr. Bassias, Nick?
We're talking about the offshore.
No, I think that it is to do with creating, we spoke about creating a market for the gas in the region, and what sort of an infrastructure cooperation. I think this is I'm kind of guessing, but that's where it is not on the upstream, but probably on the midstream market creation front that this question is aimed at.
What kind of local infrastructure?
Personally, from my side, I'd say it'd be more on the LNG development, developing the LNG infrastructure. If there's a surplus of gas, of course, you can regas that. You can regas and sell on the open market, and there will always be spot cargoes and contract LNG supplies that could be provided to anywhere in the world. I mean, you've got the Suez there, you have everything else. You just need chance buyers. So I'd say the LNG infrastructure there will be potentially a very lucrative and a relatively straightforward infrastructure with some very well established US partners as well, and other partners.
I don't know if I might respond, on the regulation side, whether there is, and I don't know enough about the region, particularly because some countries are outside the EU, some are within the EU. What is the situation regarding interconnectivity between these countries for intercountry pipelines? Because those pipelines can, the moment you have interconnectivity, you're probably kind of creating a more integrated gas market in the region. And I know that the Mediterranean Regulators Forum does exist and is very active, but I do not know whether the MedReg Forum has taken up this idea, and whether it might be actually an idea to create a common access, common carrier network model in the East Mediterranean region. So that would be my response.
Well, in any case, for the onshore, you need pipelines. I don't think that we are at the stage to have trucks, LNG trucks, driving on the roads. It's like if you have potential bombs to explode everywhere, not for any other reason than an accident, simple accident.
The safety aspect of it.
The problem with LNG still today is that it is not one project. In fact, there's 3 stages. There are 3 centers of cost. You need to have the LNG with the trains, where you will liquefy. Then you need the vessels, the ships, they will transport. And then you need the FSRUs.
Yes.
So you have 3 costs, not with the same investor.
Yes.
The advantage is that you can bring the liquefied gas from everywhere, not from the Southeast Mediterranean, which is the case also. Yeah. The pipelines, you have one cost. Maybe you can detail that, but it is one cost, and it is, I would say, one investor or fund who will take care of that. So it makes things easier. Yeah, there was something before we talked. There was a question about CNG. The problem with CNG, I think, is that you cannot compress the gas, you cannot liquefy, so you cannot bring that to volumes 600 times less.
No.
So it is for short distances. For instance, in Greece, it can work between islands, and then the storage, I mean, on the vessels, it becomes difficult. You have much more metal vessel than your gas, because you cannot compress that in the way you compress that when it is liquefied. And this is why it will not be economical for large distances.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I think we have...
Ashutosh, we have 2 more questions.
Well, I think the one by Nicodemus on the possibility of separate hydrocarbon frontier, yep, on, I think has been answered kind of, when we kind of combined that question with Fivos's question on, the frontier activity. And, purchase of Nobel by Chevron, I think we've also kind of discussed. So I think to my mind, there are no open questions. If there is, have a look at the dismiss. I think most of them are. There is one question which I had seen come very early on, where someone asked us a view on the future price of oil. I don't know if we can. I don't know if any of us is really qualified to answer that in the current circumstances. But if the two gentlemen would like to take their punt, I will offer that, and then yeah.
Well, I don't mind just putting my 5 eggs in, as we say in England. So I think demands. We're seeing Brent and WTI and Urals actually sort of sharpening to a $41 to $44 a barrel today, which is slightly unusual, because usually Urals, and there's usually a bit of a fairly major discrepancy there. So we're seeing that point, and that's really with a sluggish demand in Europe. So that gives me some cause for hope that we are seeing the market slowly returning. I mean, really, European demand for aviation, for example, maritime fuels and others. I mean, people aren't doing long road trips as they were. So really demand is down. And with that price, I think that gives us some cause for hope. Now, if there's a second, say, spike or a lockdown, obviously that will have a major impact on the prices. But if I was to have a hazard a guess, I'd say $50 to $60 a barrel for the year. Probably not much above that, and probably not much below 40 based on current projections.
Okay.
But how long is a piece of string?
Thank you. How long is a piece of string indeed?
Maybe some more mergers. We need some more mergers, and then the price will go up. But until now, and you had the example, it is not only that. I mean, Chevron with Noble,
yes,
acquisitions or mergers. A lot of things are happening in West Africa now.
Right.
I read recently about Senegal also. So some concentration will become the trend for the next months until the end of the year, and maybe then the price of the barrel will go up. Yeah.
Excellent. So are there, I mean, we are running close to time, but, if there are any concluding statements you would like to make, some key points based on what we've discussed today, the floor is yours.
I'll very briefly summarize. I mean, I think despite the ongoing difficulties, and there are ongoing difficulties, I mean, you have to be fairly pie in the sky to think otherwise. We are seeing the price of oil remaining relatively stable. Demand is slowly increasing. New discoveries are being made, and this is an industry that requires constant investment and operation. So I think if there's any industry that will weather the current storm, it will be the oil and gas industry, because we have weathered similar storms before. So I think there are some cause for optimism for the next 18 months.
Dr. Bassias? Dr. Bassias?
No, I think we covered everything. So
great.
Very happy, and thanks for thanks to the moderator.
Absolutely.
And the organizers. Because the webinars, it is a new fashion now, but it is necessary until the time that we will be able to gather again in the
and I hope we are able to all gather in the old-fashioned way. Indeed. And to that, I think, Nick, there are, this was the first in the series of webinars. Absolutely. There's probably going to be more.
Absolutely.
We have still 63 participants, so we've kind of, we've not,
rather good,
not put off too many people. So Nick, do you want to kind of, have the last announcements regarding upcoming webinars, everything?
And I'll just give a small announcement.
It just remains for me to then thank everyone, and I'll leave with Nick to make the announcements regarding the next webinars. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much, Ashutosh, and for great moderating there, and thank you once again, and also to Yannis. It was a very good discussion. So, look, whilst we had to postpone EMC this year, there were no other options, sadly. We are looking to run it in 2021. That's all the information is up on the website. But in lieu of that, and in the meantime, we put together what we call EMC Live, so East Mediterranean Offshore Congress Live, and it's going to compose of 5 to 6 webinars between now and December, all of which will follow the similar format. So the next presentation we have is on the 16th of September, which will be looking at the practical considerations of doing business in the oil and gas sector, and we'll be looking specifically to put together a real how to actually come work with existing partners, what are the pitfalls, some legalities, etc. And then on the 14th of October, we have the Israeli oil and gas industry in focus, and then followed on with the Cypriot oil and gas sector in focus on the 25th of November, and then finalizing with a similar talk to today on the 16th of December with what does 2021 hold for the Eastern Mediterranean basin. Now that'll be a nice question to end the year. But yeah, so we're looking to run these and very much look forward to welcoming you all back. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It remains now for me to thank the organizers for their stellar job in making sure webinars are tricky things to manage online with this, but it's worked very well. I hope you would agree. And although we are not in the physical format, but I hope you will join me in acknowledging the presentations and the participation in the usual form. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.